Welcome, everyone, to our next in a series of judge interviews. I'm your host, John Scoggin, and with me today is Your Honor himself, Lawrence Zhou. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. So, hi, I'm Lawrence Zhou. I'm an assistant debate coach at the Harker School. I appreciate the shout out that we got last episode for our younger kids being able to use their computers, a skill that is underrated nowadays. And I'm also a curriculum director at VBI.
And it's my understanding that you also are the host of a popular podcast. You want to plug?
T popular, but thanks for the plug. So Martin Siglo, an assistant debate coach at Lake Highland, and I run a podcast called The Argument Clinic. It's an LD debate podcast for all, designed to improve access to resources, to improve debate quality all across the country. It's similar to y'all's Debate for All series, except we don't really focus on circuit debate, but instead on sort of like core debate concepts that like local debaters might use, and that can help everyone. And you can find us on SoundCloud and iTunes at The Argument Clinic.
Well, I definitely recommend checking out The Argument Clinic if you guys have not yet. Even for your more intermediate debaters, just because a solid understanding of fundamentals is critical to any debater's success. And in my view, you and Martin are doing the community a great service, something that we try to do as well. So I recommend it in the strongest terms. Okay, now that we have the introductions out of the way, I'm going to ask you a series of questions here. The first one is I want you to tell me the Lawrence origin story. How'd you first get into debate? Who was the first person you looked up into the activities, stuff like that?
All right. So I joined debate in the 9th grade at the prompting of my dad, who, as an Asian scientist, was worried that his child would only be good at math and science and unable to communicate with the rest of the world. And little did he know that my foray into debate would actually lead me to hate math and science and only like debate. So I think it backfired a little bit on him. Whoopsies. I debated in a school called Bartlesville, Oklahoma, which has a town size about the size of the college I currently attend. So it's pretty tiny. And I did mostly local debate. I only went to two circuit tournaments ever. I went to like UT Austin my junior year and Grapevine my senior year, where I lost in the octas to the Akil Gandra. And that is really the extent of my involvement with circuit debate as in high school, actually.
Well, some would say that you had a little bit of success at the national level, though.
Oh, yeah. So I won this tournament called the NSDA National Tournament. I guess that's the only thing that qualifies me to speak about debate. And my interest in circuit debate actually just came from me randomly stumbling across some videos of people talking at each other at high rates of speed. And I was like, what is this? This makes no sense. And after watching countless hours of videos, I stumbled upon the Danny Dubois, who ends up being the first person that I really look up to, because I found the videos of young Danny, who really wasn't spreading very fast as a sophomore, for instance. And then just like watched all of his rounds. And so he actually became the first person I looked up into debate, despite the fact that he's actually like slightly younger than I am by a few months.
Well, yeah, he certainly is a very naturally talented debater. And I'm sure plenty of hard work associated with that too. But did he not just win some major tournament of some type?
Yeah, he won the like World Schools Debating Championship, like WUDC or something in Mexico. Like he won the whole world of debate.
Not bad, not bad. So I mean, a mere national champion like yourself has to look up a world champion, right?
Yeah, I can't compare to that.
Okay, well, I think that's a pretty interesting story. And then how did you go from doing mostly local debate, and how did you kind of convert that into being kind of a stalwart on the circuit?
A few things is, first, I was always super interested in circuit debate. And so the reason I like really appreciate what a lot of YouTube channels like Premieres is doing is putting out debate rounds, is because that was just how I got into learning about circuit. I ended up getting into circuit debate in a few different ways. The first was like, obviously after winning Nats, like they hired me at camp because I guess I'm good advertisement and whatnot. And And number two is I ended up running into a few people at nationals my senior year who ended up helping me along the way. People like Amy Geller from Harrison High School, who after she was eliminated from the tournament gave me all of Danny's prep on the topic. And same with Akil Gondra, who I lost to early in the year. He gave me a lot of the prep on the Nats topic, and that actually helped me win the final round. And so I ended up making some friends along the way at Nats, and that also helped me get into circuit debate.
Isn't that amazing how people come together, after they've been eliminated and still are involved in the process? That in all the years I've spent at TSC and previously NFL and now NSDA Nationals and stuff like that, that's always been one of the coolest things to see. It's just to see someone who's not on your team just get wholeheartedly behind you and do everything they can to help you win.
Yeah, I think that was probably like a better feeling than actually winning the tournament, was like realizing, wow, cool, like some people are supporting me along the way. And Herzig, after Amy was eliminated from the tournament, who's the coach at Harrison, even watched a few of my rounds and gave me some tips afterwards to help me along the way. And so I ended up giving him a shout out in finals, because like that was something that meant a lot, because I'd looked up to Herzig a lot, and before he even knew who I was. And like that was really cool.
That's awesome. Shout out to Shaden. So next, I'm going to ask you to give a bit of a superlative here, and maybe we've already covered this, but the next question is, who is your favorite debater to watch for the last 5 years?
And I don't have a good answer to this question. So like, I'm biased by history, obviously, because Danny was one of the first people that I knew who I watched and thought was like super awesome. There's so many good debaters. I guess I'll just stick with Danny because it's like an easy one. I just thought he exuded so much like perceptual dominance and just like was so smart in rounds. And maybe there are a few debates throughout the time that I've seen that I've really really enjoyed watching, like debates like by like Akil Jalan, for instance. But I think overall I'll stick with Danny as my favorite debater to have watched.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good choice. Obviously, a very talented champion there. So the next topic we're going to cover here is I picked out a line from your paradigm, and I hope you know that I read it very carefully. So we're going to be going into pretty great depth here. But
oh no,
it says, what experience do you have as a judge? And you wrote too much. I went to the record to confirm this. And you judged 163 rounds this year on tab room. How are you doing? Are you okay?
Yeah, so I keep actually a really detailed judging record that you can find. Like I have a link to it somewhere in my philosophy. I think this season I'm at 173 rounds, not including local rounds, PF rounds, or policy rounds. And I think I'm just barely hanging on to sanity at this point.
As I understand, you're just on your way back from the Western JV and Novice National Championship. How was that?
That was a pretty fun experience. Sometimes you get like a little bit worn down from just watching the same varsity rounds happen, and you're just like, oh, good debate, but whatever. And then you watch a few novice debates that sort of give you hope for the future, because these kids have like excellent core debating skills and they have just so much enthusiasm for the activity, and it gives you like that little bit of hope needed to survive until the end of the season.
And just out of curiosity, and so we can give them a shout out or whatnot, do you know who the champions were?
I believe Doherty Valley SM was the JV champion, and I left before I could figure out who the novice champion was.
Okay, well,
but Sarim from Doherty Valley is the one who I think won the final round, and I'd actually judged him at Berkeley beforehand. So shout out to him for having a really good equivalent to like some outrounds you might see at bid tournaments, and they're both just second year debaters.
Well, congratulations to Sarim, and I got the pairing here, and just in case we have a bit of a mix-up, great result by Cameron as well from Marlboro. So shout out to both of you two. So in doing these judge interviews, one thing that interests me is trying to figure out who judged like the absolute maximum national circuit round. And right now, and obviously much more investigation needs to take place. So far, you're number 2 of the people that I've been able to find out. You've only been exceeded thus far by Jonas.
Yes. That that rings true to me. I think Jonas has been to just a few more tournaments than I have, and when I'm judging for Harker, I generally try to get out of the pool early, whereas Jonas will stay in. And if I'm judging for the tournament, then obviously I want to stay in for the extra money. So
there you go. Okay, so another little thing I noticed in your paradigm that stuck out to me was I noticed that you said you call clear 2 times. I do that too. Do you have any idea where the 2 times thing came from? Because I don't remember where I got it, but at some point I thought this was a great idea.
I have actually no clue. I do it because the first time, like they may not understand what I really mean by clear, but the third time I think is excessive and like I've exhausted any patience I have. So I think two is just like the reasonable middle ground I've settled on.
And then what's your rule about? So let's say you've called clear for the second time and you find their clarity to be insufficient. Do you come back in, or are you putting the pen on the table or closing them? What happens?
I don't think I've ever had to do this, but I would just stop flowing until like they've made a very clear and concerted effort to like be clear again, because I'm not going to try until they try.
Okay, and this is also from personal observation, but have you noticed people be less and less observant of your calls of clear and not make those major changes in recent years?
Yeah, actually, it's really strange because like the first time I'll call clear, they won't react, and then the second time they will. But like the first time when I say clear, for some reason they just think that like lowering the pitch of their voice constitutes
Yeah.
clarity concern, and it's just like no, you're still too fast, like still mumbling. I still can't understand you.
Yeah, I don't know what it's about, but I don't. Do you feel a bit like it's almost a bit disrespectful to not make a more conscious effort to change what you're doing when clear is called?
Um, Not sure if disrespectful, but definitely just like it's debate's still like a communicative activity. And like obviously, if I'm someone that judges as often as I do and I still can't follow your spreading, like it's most likely not a me thing, it's a you thing.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. And you've kind of gotten to what my final question would be on this. Is debate still primarily a communication activity, or do you think that with all the changes to the trends of having, the entire 1NC scripted, portions of the 2NR scripted, lots big portions of 1AR scripted, do you think that that has significantly decreased?
Uh it's below where I would like it to be. Like I feel like the pre-written stuff shouldn't trade off with debate as a communicative activity, but if all they're doing is just like reading straight into their laptop and not really making any effort to try to be persuasive or, interact the arguments in round and like give a speech that is like an actual speech, yeah, I wish that trend would go away.
And what do you think can be done to strike the proper balance between the communicative desires that people have and the trend now to be very fast, less inflection, less of the communicative elements with the longer
I don't know. It seems
pre-scripted
like
blows?
yeah, I like a lot of policy speeches where they manage to mold the sort of persuasive communicative activity part with like the tons of prep part. I think LDers have just like gotten lazy and just started reading Ev. I think as judges, like we can use speaker points to sort of hold people more accountable and just I think like debaters should come to realize that like it also matters that debate is communicative activity, not just because of judge preference, because in close debates, like it helps a lot in the decision of the judge. Like whoever was a better speaker just tends to win a little bit more if it's a close debate.
Yes, I 100% agree. And then obviously, it's cutting into kind of the portability of the skills. If you can't at any point, shift out of like spreading up pre-written material. I always thought that that was one of the most important skills to be able to come in and out of it. Like, okay, yeah, I'm going to read 3 cards, dense cards about what's going on in the South China Sea that are pretty boring and fact based. But then I'm going to come out of that and I'm going to slow down and I'm going to make you know, more persuasive analysis that kind of tells me what just happened.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
All right. So I wanted to move on to critique affirmatives. You cite TVA is a big element of whether or not you'll vote on a non-TF, and well, perhaps I should explain this. The existence or lack thereof of a topical version of the affirmative. Can you talk about the prominence of using a TVA in your evaluation of a critique app?
Yeah, so it's when I'm judging policy, I tend to find that this is less of an issue because most policy critical apps will criticize something that's pretty closely related to the concept of affirming the resolution. So, for example, in finals of CETA, Rutgers read an app that was like it was about black labor and how demanding that they affirm the resolution was bad. But I feel like most LD apps are kind of weird because they don't the K apps that are not topical because they tend to propose something that like doesn't really criticize that much. Like they'll just say like we should affirm being a feminist killjoy or queer anarchy, something like that. And they don't really make an argument as to like why resolutional affirmation is structurally impossible or the harms of doing so are just so great that they must outweigh or be a prior question to every other concern in the round. And so I feel like in these debates, topical version of the AF is just the easiest way for the negative to eliminate a lot of the AF's offense on topicality because they're just like, hey, that thing that you talked about, like being a feminist killjoy, that's not so removed from the question of the resolution that you should totally ignore the resolution. And I feel like in a lot of these debates, the topical version of the AF is just so like strategic because these AFs just affirm something that it's not strategic for the AF, but also like doesn't ever really, I think, criticize the resolution that strongly.
So if I'm preparing to debate in front of you, I should definitely look to that as a central part of my reputation of a non-topical app as a negative debater.
Yeah, like when I was debating at the Kentucky tournament this year, I didn't really do that much prep for this tournament. I only cut 4 cards the entire tournament, but all 4 of them were a topical version of the AF to an AF that was talking about gender hacking. And they were making an argument about how we should affirm gender hacking. And I read like 4 pieces of evidence. I was like, here's how you can do so in the context of universal healthcare. And that's what the judge ended up voting on because we were just like, none of the stuff that you've talked about like precludes debating the topic. And I find that to be like a pretty strategic way for the negative to engage these affirmatives because it sort of it will help mitigate the AF's ability to leverage their AF against T. And I think it's just mostly the true response. So like very rarely does the AF actually prove that they should not debate the resolution. And so when the neg points it out by reading a piece of carded evidence about the literature base the AF discusses and topicality and the topical version of the AF, then that's really persuasive to me.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. So the next topic I have that I pulled from your paradigm is that you say most LD advantages are severely underwarranted. What can we do about that?
Yeah, so I think there are 2 things. The first is there's the obvious one, just like AFs can write better advantages. But independent of that, I think the first thing is that negative debaters should write better case negs. Because only when AFs are punished for having underwarranted advantages, for like missing internal links, not really having good solvency claims, or just getting away with like outlandish claims that are not justified by their evidence, only then when they're punished for that will they write better advantages. Because like the incentive is not particularly strong to write a good advantage nowadays. If the neg is only going to just read like one impact defense card and call it a day, like the negs have got to get good on pressing the internals of the advantages and making the AF actually defend what they're saying. And I think number 2 is judges should hold the line a lot more on explanation of bad evidence. In my mind, a good argument is spin plus ev quality. And I think judges are letting debaters get away with too much spin and not enough ev quality instead of holding it at approximately equal value. That good spin plus good evidence is the optimal solution. But too many AF.
Oh, hey, Lawrence, are you still there with us? Oh, it sounds like you cut out for a little bit there.
Boy, where did I cut out?
So you were describing how people need to hold others accountable or affirmatives accountable for when they write bad advantages, and then you were just getting into a part about how judges might let people get away with too much spin on the evidence.
Okay. Yeah. So I can just restart at
Yeah,
that part. Okay. So I think that number two is that judges should hold the line a lot more on explanation of bad evidence. I think a good argument is good spin plus good ev quality, and that is a good arg. But too many judges, I think, are allowing people to get away with great spin, bad ev quality, and I don't think that's the way to go. I think judges need to be like, your spin has to be basically proportional to the quality of your evidence, and if the ev is bad from the start because you under highlighted it and you just like didn't and you just had an underwarranted advantage, like no amount of spin should be allowed to get out of that. And so judges need to hold the line and be willing to say in an RFD, like, look, there was just a missing internal link in the advantage. Like I can't vote for it. It was not a complete argument.
yeah, and I think just to piggyback on that, that there's also a separate issue that negatives aren't forcing that issue enough. There
Yeah.
seems to be a trend to have more and longer off case positions, whether they're extremely long disadvantages or long critiques. And then instead of really line by lining the app, just reading like 3 or 4 generic case turns and calling it a day on case, how can
Yeah.
we encourage negatives to spend more time on case?
Um, well, I think the first issue is like people view this too much as policy debate where like, oh, the what and C in policy gets to jump cards. But then like they miss the part where the 2 and C will spend another 4 minutes on case explaining all of their cards and then doing internals work on the advantage, like explaining missing internal links, explaining alt causes, explaining solvency deficits and stuff like that. Something that just does not exist in LD. So like from the start, I think changing people's mindsets about how the 1 and C is supposed to look is pretty helpful. Number two is like judges should reward like that good behavior. Like if the negs 1 and C is just like 3 minutes of pushing the AF's advantage and pointing out every problem with it, like that should not, like judges, I think nowadays for some reason think that's unstrategic. They're like, oh, you should have just read another dissat. And it's like, no, I think like that's really good case debating work. And I think when judges hold the line on that and force the AF to answer every problem that their advantage has because it was underwarranted from the start, then that will start incentivizing negs to actually like do good case debate work.
Well, I can tell you that I find that line of argumentation very persuasive, and I'm definitely willing to make a personal commitment at the very least to make sure that negatives that spend ample amount of time answering affirmative advantages and coming up with good offense, uh, on case as well, are rewarded in both the win column and speaker points, and I hope other judges do that too.
Yeah, I think minimally speaker points because like there's nothing more impressive than an egg just destroying an AF for like 4 minutes in the 2 and R on their how bad their advantage is. Well, probably not 4 minutes; it's a bit long, but like 3 minutes just like explaining how bad the advantage is. Like that's just impressive because you're going to beat the AF at their own game. Like that clearly shows that someone's doing the better debating.
Yes, I tend to agree with that. Uh, Speaking of better debating, I am on a personal crusade for better critique alternatives. I see that you may be a kindred spirit.
I am.
What do we do? Because I think the situation is dire.
It's I think it's getting bad. Like this isn't even the policy hack side of me coming out, although like it should be kind of apparent where my affiliations lie, but it's just like it's also kind of harmful for just critical education when these alternatives are just so underexplained and vague. Um and like I mean, I think again, it lies with judges who are just allowing critiques to just filling in so much explanation for critiques and just allowing neg debaters to like make such sweeping claims like the alt solves the case somehow, even though and without even explaining what the alternative really does. And judges are just allowing that explanation to, be filled in for them. And it's like, that's such bad judging practice, honestly.
Have we moved the needle perhaps a bit too far on the spin basically will accept on evidence? Because that seems to be a common theme both here on the alternative and our previous discussion of advantages.
Yeah, I think that is pretty I think that's like a pretty reasonable reading of how I view a lot of things. It's just like ev quality matters.
So basically, if you're trying to get that 30 from Lawrence, the way you do it is have high quality evidence and reasonable, well thought out explanation of evidence interaction. And while that might you might be more on the policy side of things, it seems like really anyone doing that with whatever type of argument is going to have a pretty decent shot in front of you.
Yeah, I mean, like in round, I just consider myself a debate nihilist, and I have very, very few opinions as to like what's happening in round. I like all sorts of debates when I'm judging them. It's just like obviously my personal predispositions lie more towards the policy side. But yeah, I just K alternatives. Ugh, nowadays they do so little. They don't even half the time provide any uniqueness for the link arguments that the whole point of the alternative is to do that, and they just don't even. Ugh, yeah.
Yeah, it is. Well, then maybe, and we'll see how you feel about the second thing here is that pre-scripted 2NR overviews, especially on the critique, but on all types of stuff that are pretty lengthy and anticipate 1AR arguments before they're made. What do you think about these
so
2NRs?
Yeah, so you and Varad had a relatively lengthy discussion. I recall pretty much agreeing with everything y'all said. I'm sort of in the camp that are just like some overviews are good, like overviews that make it easy on the judges, make everything into a cohesive story, and perhaps point out the greatest 1AR strategic misstep are helpful if you flag them at the top. But at the point that any of the line-by-line debating gets done in the overview, like it's too long, get rid of it. There's no way the pre-scripted overview that you've written that's like 2 minutes long is actually responsive to what the 1AR said, even if the 1AR was mostly pre-scripted, because everything changes in round. And at the point that like the overview is answering like the 1AR solvency deficits, the alternative, like the overview is too long. Move it to the line by line.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And actually, Bob was looking over my questions for this interview, and he said, "Hey, didn't you already ask that question?" And I said, "I'm going to keep asking it. I'm going to ask again. I'm going to find out where everyone stands." It's a bit of a cause for me because I just think, well, no, this is an interview about you. I'll cut my rant out there. I don't like it.
I likely will agree with whatever you say. So.
Well, we can refer people back to the Farad interview. I think I unpacked it pretty well there. So the next thing I see in your paradigm, you say the state is good. How dare you?
Yes, I'm an unapologetic defender of the state. I mean, probably not our current government, not a huge fan of that, but I've yet to be convinced of any viable alternative to the state, and I will take that opinion with me for the foreseeable future, probably until the grave.
Well, you heard it here first, or well, unless you were a diligent paradigm reader. You lean AF on most cheating CPs. What's the best way for someone to know if their counterplan is a cheating counterplan? Are there any cheating CPs that you have a particular affinity for?
I don't mind any counterplan as long as they're executed well. It's just that like should the debate become relatively muddled on the theoretical layer, like I'm going to lean AF because like I sympathize being AF having been a 2A in college policy. To figure out if something is cheating, I think generally the existence of a solvency advocate helps mitigate the vast majority of theory objections. If it's in the literature, there's a good chance there's responses to it. And I think my gut check for me is just like, is there a meaningful point of difference reflected in the literature? And if there is, then it's probably not cheating. And if there isn't, then it's probably cheating.
Well, that's a pretty clean line. I think that people having listened to that would know much better how to put together their 1NC docs.
Yeah. Which isn't to say that I don't like, your good process counterplan debates and sometimes even agent counterplan debates. But in the end, if it comes down to it, I'm a little bit more athleting on the theory objections to those counterplans.
In my experience, people that have a policy background or generally like policy style arguments have one counterplan that they know in their heart is kind of bad, but they have a shine to it, whether it's, they ran some delay counterplan their junior year or whatever. There's usually one that they have a little bit more affection for than the others.
So a lot of people have that. I'm, for example, partial towards Jacob Nails's 7-year counterplan, which is like do the plan, but for only 7 years, and then redo the plan because Thomas Jefferson proposed back in the day that enough people would become new citizens that those laws would unjustly affect them, and we should have a debate as to whether or not that law should continue to exist for new people. That's a good counterplan. But because I was a 2A in college policy, I definitely have a lot of leaning towards the AF on a lot of these debates.
Sure, of course. All right, well, I think we've talked about most of the major issues that came up in your paradigm. And so I'd like to leave it on a more lighthearted note. Are you more of a cat person or a dog person?
I'm more of a dog person, and I consider this to be an apparent and indisputable truth up on approximately the same level as 2 + 2 = 4.
Yes, that is a strong endorsement of the canines.
I think just like I've never had a bad experience with a dog, but sometimes you just have those weird experiences with cats where you think that they want to murder you, and that's not something that I really want. So,
well, I think for the cat, it's just like you're in their space and they're just keeping an eye on you, like so that you're not messing their stuff up.
It doesn't sit well with me. Dogs all the way.
Okay, well, thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview with me. Was it Choi? Was it Choi that
it was? It was Choi that posted my name, and I stumbled on complete accident that he had commented that because he didn't even like tag me. He just decided to throw it in there.
Yeah, I believe he did the classic space between each letter. But shout out to Choi for making a great suggestion on who to interview. If you enjoyed this interview, make sure to give it a like and consider subscribing to our channel. If you want to hear more from Lawrence, or if there's any desperate follow-up questions that I missed, I'd be happy to follow up. If you have suggestions for who you think we might interview in the future, feel free to leave them in the comments or on our Facebook page. On behalf of Premier Debate, we hope you've enjoyed this interview and look forward to more coming up. Any last words you want to share with our audience, Lawrence?
I think Martin Siglo would be sad if I did not end by saying the classic argument clinic ending phrase, which is stay frosty.
Stay frosty, everyone. All right. Thanks for tuning in today.